agenda called to order. Would you join us in the Pledge of Allegiance? Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. So we'll go slightly out of order and start with the second item on the agenda, item B, Appeal 3151, Traverse Investment Partners, located at 317 Ivan Avenue, request an extension of time for obtaining permits under Section 280-144 of the Code for 6 months until March 6th, 2024. George?
Hi, good evening. I'm George Brosman. I represented the applicant on this matter. You might recall this is the property next door to the township building here at 317 Ivan Avenue. There was relief granted for some very small amount of steep slopes that were created when the dwelling that was on the property had been created or had been built. That dwelling was dilapidated, and my client got a building demolition permit to tear that building down, and they tore the building down. In doing so, the slopes have been removed, so I'm not sure an extension is really needed, but out of an abundance of caution, since this was a two-lot subdivision plan, my client hasn't gotten a building permit for the new homes. Since we were here, they did receive subdivision approval. They just got permission from the township to record the plan, the subdivision plan that was recorded on September 11th, and they've just applied for a grading permit for Lot 1. So they've been moving diligently, and to the extent we need that extension, that's why we have requested it.
Motion to approve a 6-month extension.
Second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
The motion is granted, and the extension is for 6 months, for 6 months from March 6, 2023.
Thank you.
The second item on the agenda is item A, Appeal 3129. The applicant is Welpina, property located at 400 South.
It's a different agenda than I have.
Request an extension of time for obtaining permits under Section 280-144 of the Code. Mr. Pina,
Good evening.
step up to the mic so everybody can hear you.
Miguel Pena.
Mr. Pina, we have a letter. We received a letter from, that was forwarded to the board from Mary Ann Cassidy, dated, the letter is dated September 18th, 2023. Mary Ann Cassidy is the administrative assistant for the Community Development Department. And the letter is regarding 400 South Wayne Avenue, extension of time for obtaining permit under Section 280-144 of the Code. I can mark this as Exhibit A to put into the record. And I'll read the letter into the record so everybody has an idea of what we're talking about. Dear Ms. Cassidy, it has been brought to my attention that I need to request an extension from the zoning board for my active grading permit. While I'm not exactly clear on the date/deadline, it seems the lapse was a result of the subsequent pre-construction revisions I made to the plans. The original permit was granted within the 6-month window, but the time it took to revise the plans, submit, and receive the revised permit caused the lapse. Would you kindly schedule me for this week's zoning hearing board so that I may make my request? Please confirm at your earliest convenience. And then in the final paragraph, you pose a question to presumably Ms. Cassidy. Also, are you able to explain to me the timing element going forward, open parens, if any, close parens, question mark? My project will be completed in multiple phases over time. Therefore, it would be helpful to understand if I will need to request another extension in the future. Signed, Miguel Pina. So you were the author of that letter, is that correct?
Yes, sir.
Are you aware of the deadline, when the deadline actually was? Are you aware of the fact that you missed the deadline?
Yeah, I was made aware of that, which prompted that letter. I received the permit, and the permit which allowed me to commence the project, so that's why I was surprised when I got a phone call saying that I needed to come back in front of the zoning board to ask for an extension.
Right.
I actually received 2 permits.
What was the second permit?
When I received, so just to give you the rough timeline, I got zoning board approval in July of last year. By the time I actually received the permit for construction, it was somewhere end of November, early December. I then, in the middle of winter, I'm not going to start the project for obvious reasons. I then decided that I was going to make changes to the plans, which I started around January, February. I then received the permit for the revised plan in July, and I started work on the project 2 weeks ago. And a week into it, I got a call from the township, from Mrs. Cassidy, saying that I had to come back in front of the zoning board to ask for an extension.
Okay. Well, the decision of the zoning hearing board, which was July 21st, 2022.
Yes, sir.
You recall that? You were here.
Yes, sir.
It says in the bottom that it will expire if the applicant fails to obtain a building permit within 6 months of the date, September 2nd, 2022, and that would, and in addition, you have to begin, I think the term is substantial, you have to put a shovel in the ground.
Yeah, and I think that's where the misunderstanding was. I didn't put a shovel in the ground because I decided to revise the plans, which took time, and as a result of that, by the time I actually got the permit for the revised plans, the window of time allowed by the zoning board had lapsed.
Did our zoning officer see the revised plans and approve them?
It's a good question, Mr. Lord. I have no idea. Once I got the permit, I assumed I was good to go.
Last time you were here, it was recommended that you hire legal counsel. And we're going to make that recommendation again. We can't force you to do it. You're free to represent yourself, of course. But the fact that the plans were changed, you're not sure if they have been approved, that whatever the changes are, we don't know. They're not in front of us. We have no idea what you've done. They may trigger another variance application. We don't know.
Yeah, I mean, I didn't hire counsel, but I hired a professional engineer that revised the plans and communicated with the township. So
Is that engineer here?
he's not. Yeah, no, I didn't feel he should be here.
Well, that's why you need an attorney.
I'm pretty confident, Mr. Lord, I don't need to go through zoning again. The changes that were made to the plan, I think, were very favorable to the township, not just to the property.
Well, where you are right now is that the grant of the variance is theoretically, or not theoretically, but it's actually expired. It's not beyond redemption in the sense that we could give another extension even though you've let the date pass. It isn't a huge gap in time, but what's troubling is really the fact that you've changed plans and we don't know exactly what you did to the plans.
Well, I can,
And the approval that was granted before was an approval based upon those plans that were presented to the zoning hearing board at that time, not ex parte plans that you make thereafter, of which we have no knowledge, and I guess our township engineer and a zoning officer maybe have no knowledge of them either, but as we sit here tonight, we have no information.
Mr. Lord, with all due respect, the township engineer has 100% knowledge of the plans. He's the one that allowed me to start the project in the first place. Just to refresh your memory, the reason why I came in for a variance is because I needed relief for steep slopes. The revised plans don't remove any additional steep slopes at all. So there's nothing in the revisions that I made that would require me to go back through zoning. The
Well, there might be
only,
a difference of opinion on that particular subject.
well, I
but
would
we don't have
imagine
the
that my
plans-
engine,
We don't have the plans in order to make that determination.
that's fair from your perspective, but if we just follow the sequence of events, my engineer would have certainly told me you have to go back through zoning when he revised these stamped drawings that were submitted to the township, which were then approved by the township, given the fact, as evident by the fact that they gave me a permit a second time. So I have 2 permits in this file. One for the plans that were approved by the zoning board, and then one for the revisions. I just didn't know, I was unaware that I needed to come back and ask for an extension because I didn't realize the time had lapsed because of the revisions. So that was an honest mistake, but I hired a professional engineer who was here and presented in front of you. The same engineer revised the plans, and the same township engineer approved the permit, via the planning commission, the revisions to the permit. I didn't have to go back in front of the planning commission for the revisions. They were simple revisions. Somebody would have told me that I need to come back before you if I needed another variance. So I respectfully ask you to let me finish this project now that it's been a year and a half.
Do you have a copy of the permit that was approved?
Yes. Would you like to see it?
Yes,
Yeah,
please.
absolutely. Guess we're not going to have multiple copies. Yeah, if you put it up on the screen.
Put on that table, Mr. Bennett, they'll be able to, you can overhead projector, you just put it on that table facing you. There you go, if you can see it on the screen, that's center.
I also have a copy of the stormwater management and maintenance agreement that I'm required to sign before I could get the permit.
Mr. Penn, do you mind, if you look at that screen,
Yeah,
it's
yep.
centered a little more so they can zoom in even more. Yeah, that's it.
So that's a grading permit. Do you have a building permit?
I don't need a building permit.
The question was, do you have a building permit?
No, I didn't need one. I'm doing
Structures.
I'm doing a retaining wall and ultimately building a patio. I'm not building any structures.
Patios.
I'm not building a patio in this phase of the project. So, and just so we're clear, I had no intention on building the patio in this phase of the project. I put it on the plans in the spirit of transparency. I was advised by my engineer to put everything on the plan, including all future projects, in the spirit of transparency, and to build the stormwater management system large enough in terms of volume to account for all those future projects, whether I build them or not, which I'm doing. So this phase of the project is literally just trying to build a retaining wall in front of the dirt wall that has now been exposed for a year and a half.
A question. So part of the order says variance relief from the requirements of the zoning code, blah, 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 is granted to permit the sleep slope disturbance in the precise location and dimensions shown on Exhibit AC-2. Has AC-2 changed? Has any of the dimensions, locations changed at all? Because that's what the variance was granted on. So if you changed any of the boulder location, the wall locations, the variance isn't good anymore.
We did.
You
Yeah.
did change them.
Yeah, we just pushed the wall back.
So, do you understand? So if you changed the plans that you got a variance on, and the variance said you had to do it in the, and I'm quote, in the precise location and dimensions shown on Exhibit AC-2, the site plan that was entered into and made part of the record, your variance could only be used for that specifically. It's like saying, I would need a variance for a 10-foot ceiling, for argument's sake, and I go, great, you got it. And you go, you know what, I'm just gonna change it to 11. And we go, but you didn't get a variance for 11. You got a variance for 10. So that's your issue right now. Maybe they should not have granted you the permit. Maybe they shouldn't have. I mean, I think what the chairman was saying, perhaps if you saw a lawyer, you might be able to get what are the words, variance by estoppel or something like that? I'm not going to give, I am a lawyer, but I'm not going to give it.
Get some good advice.
You could get some good advice maybe to make your argument. But right now, again, what's in front of us is your testimony that you've changed the plans.
No, I understand.
And your variance is granted on those set of plans.
I understand. And
Yep.
look, forgive my ignorance. I just assumed, bad assumption on my part, that if I go to the township and say, hey, I'm making these changes, have my engineer change the plans, and I go to the township and say, hey, can you give me a permit to do these revisions? They should say, Mr. Pena, you should probably go back in front of the zoning board.
Again, you may have an argument
Mr.
that
Chairman.
you could put in front of us.
Okay?
Mr. Chairman, if I may, just as just a suggestion to the board, I have no idea of how you're inclined to go with granting the extension or not, but if you are inclined to grant the extension, you certainly can condition it on it being consistent with the board's approval in July of 2022 and the plans that were submitted then. You can condition it on it being consistent with, that any permits or work performed are consistent with your last decision, which was July of 2022 with respect to this appeal.
Do we have the ability to grant an extension when the extension period has gone by? That's
that-
first.
there-
Do we have standing to even do anything?
Yes, you've done it in the past. You have.
So what he was saying was, we could give you an extension, we can vote on giving you an extension if you go back to the plans,
If I go back to the original plans?
to the original plans.
The plans that were approved,
Because that's your variance.
well, you got
Yeah.
your variance.
Yeah, but that's, I mean, that's, unfortunately, it's not an option anymore because I already started the project. So we've already moved the location of the wall, once again. So, I'll do whatever I need to do, to satisfy the variance requirements. I'm happy to do it. I just want to ask for forgiveness. Honestly, this was,
You know, when somebody comes before a panel such as this one, and they're not represented by an attorney, and people should be able to bring a claim for a variance or a special exception under the zoning laws without having to get a lawyer. And many times people do. But sometimes people come with plans that are complicated enough, and even yours, I mean, we have a timeline. We see how many times it took for you to come before us before we finally got the, everything in order for you to get your variance. We can't give extra special treatment to folks and cut corners simply because they're here without an attorney and they don't have a full working understanding and knowledge sufficient to comply to the zoning codes and the variances and so on and so forth. That's all a part of this. And then when mistakes happen, it would be unfair to everybody else. If you said, hell, don't worry about it. You know, you're a civilian. We'll just look beyond it. It doesn't work like that. I mean, there's a series of major pratfalls here, which I think it's very hard to ignore. And you may have put yourself in a position where you got to start over again with your application process, at least with these new plans. And then the letter also says that you're going to be completing your project in multiple phases over time. You know, and each of those phases may require another variance or special exception or some application or appeal under the zoning laws to get that approved. And you got to toe the mark, or otherwise this is going to happen again.
no, I understand. Each phase of the project was on the original plans that the variance was granted for. The only changes I made to the plan were the location of the seepage pit, which I'm confident the zoning board will agree is a much better location, and we pushed the wall back. We pushed the wall back about another 7 feet, that's all.
Again,
In
our
doing
hands
so,
are tied.
I understand.
We're tied.
I'm just trying to
Either give you an
explain.
extension or the variance you have today, but we can't give you an extension on a variance we didn't give you.
And actually, just to clarify, the
Yeah.
condition I was referring to goes without saying. The only thing you can extend is your prior decision. So it's really just a reminder to everyone that if you're going to grant an extension, you're reminding the zoning officer and the applicant that it's pursuant to the last decision. That's the only thing you can extend. You can't amend a decision with an extension request.
We have
That
a-
you can't do.
We have a lot of experienced and highly experienced attorneys here in Radnor that can help you out. I would urge you to take advantage of them because you're just going to keep on reinventing the wheel, and time and money is going to is going to be the cost of all this, and you'd be wiser to put it into hiring a real estate attorney,
Mr.
zoning attorney. They can help you with this.
And the only other thing, Mr. Penna, I don't know if you're revising the variance or not. That's a part of the problem. The board doesn't know. They're not being presented with anything other than your letter. So if they grant your extension, again, I don't know what they're going to do, but if they grant your extension, that you're going to have to sit down with the zoning officer, and they're going to let you know whether or not you're consistent with the last decision from this board. That's what will happen.
So what's my next step, other than hire an attorney?
Well, your next step, I'm not going to give you legal advice, but my sense of the panel is we're not going to grant you an extension because we don't know what's going on.
No, I'm not asking for that. But do I need to then come back in front of the zoning board with revised plans?
I think what you have to.
The revised plans that I already have a permit for?
We don't give you legal advice. We can't do that. You should go get a lawyer, ask these questions of the lawyer, and be guided accordingly.
Understood.
So I would like to make a motion that,
We could,
go ahead, I'm sorry.
we could consider granting an extension of the original variance, just so
Yes.
that's clean.
We can.
But I would think that,
We're on notice of the fact that it's been changed and not followed.
I'm also saying that we're gonna have to talk to we need to talk to the township. They may have to issue a stop work order.
I mean, again, I'm also of the same opinion that we could grant an extension of his existing variance. Now, the question that we don't have to resolve is his permit in accordance with the variance? That's for the township. So
Right.
I'll be like, if you want to, I'm fine with voting on getting him, because it'll just give him more time, and I'm fine with that. I just, it's not for us to decide if the plans that he submitted, that they got the permit on, is going to match the variance that he has. And he can work that out with them. So, that's my opinion.
Okay.
Make a motion.
I'll make a motion.
6 months, 3 months, what do you want to do?
6 months.
Okay.
We'll make a motion to extend time for filing a building permit by additional 6 months from today? Is it from today, or from today?
6 months.
6 months extension.
I'll second it.
Vote,
Aye.
Aye.
and I vote aye. Okay.
Okay, good luck.
All right, thank you.
He's a cowboy. Pinnock.
Okay. That was a, so,
It's not our issue. Your hands are. So we only have 2 more, right?
yeah. I just forgot to do this. I wanted to, I understand that we have students from Villanova here tonight, them driven here by their professor, I assume. And, well, welcome to the Zoning Hearing Board, and I hope you're finding this interesting and educational, I might add.
Or they want to be attorneys, or want to be developers?
They're real estate,
architects?
you're in the studying real estate, is that correct? Okay.
Okay,
So
great.
you're undergraduates, right?
Read the code. That's all I'm
Yeah,
gonna say.
read the code. Read the code. So the next item on the agenda is item C, Appeal 3157. The applicant, 411 West Wayne LLC, property located at 411 West Wayne Avenue and zoned C1 Commercial. The applicant requests a variance from Section 28048C of the zoning code to reduce the required front yard of 20 feet to 14.75 feet to construct a proposed building. A variance is requested from Section 28048-.E of the zoning code to reduce the required rear yard of 35 feet, or not less than 35% of the lot depth, open parens, 38.24 feet, close parens, to 35.03 feet. to construct a proposed building. A variance is requested from Section 280-105F for a certain portion of one parking space to be less than 20 feet from the street right-of-way line. A special exception is requested from Section 280-105F for a certain portion of one parking space to be constructed in the front yard, and a variance is requested from Section 280-103 and 280-4, open parens, definition of parking space, close parens, to permit the 3 parallel parking spaces to comply with the specific subdivision and land development ordinance and standards in Section 255-29, 8 by 22 feet, in parentheses, rather than the zoning ordinance standard of 9.5 feet by 20 feet. This was continued from the July 20th, 2023 meeting. Is the applicant here? Fred?
We are. Good evening, Mr. Chairman, members of the Zoning Hearing Board.
Let me add, I'm sorry to interrupt just 1 second. The zoning hearing board, I'm sorry, I have a communication from the Planning Commission that met and reviewed these requests and voted 8-0 recommending approval of the application to the zoning hearing board. Go ahead.
Thank you. Good evening. Fred Fromhold here on behalf of the applicant, 411 West Wayne LLC, with regard to the property at 411 West Wayne Avenue. And as you had noted, Mr. Chairman, we were here last in July, and that hearing was continued with your permission, and we've really accomplished a lot since then. What I would like to do is hand out an exhibit package to each of you. We have a larger plan, the site plan, that really is going to be the main topic of discussion tonight, but we have other exhibits that I'd like to get into the record, if I can do that preliminarily here. Site plan. We have an 8 or 11 by 17 plan in the package, which is A3, which is our proposed plan. Yes, it is, and it'll be easier, hopefully, to read than the 11 by 17. If the board would permit me just a couple of minutes to go through the history here, and then we would call 3 witnesses, Ken Zhu, who was the sole member of the LLC, which is the applicant in this case, Dennis O'Neill, who's our civil engineer with McCombie Associates, and John Hertz, who has done the architectural plans that are part of our application. But the first thing I want to do is thank you for your courtesy for 2 extensions that you had granted to us. The first one was the night of the hearing when Mr. Hertz had car issues and we just didn't have all the witnesses here to testify. But I think in retrospect it was probably fortuitous, because I believe that in the meantime we've had an opportunity, with cooperation from an interested neighbor, a property owner, as well as township, to come up with what we believe is a better plan, and we hope you will view it in the same fashion. But just going back to the beginning, this property was acquired by our client, who was looking for an office. He's a real estate broker, has an office in Philadelphia, and wanted to have an office in Radnor as well. And together with having an office in Radnor, wanted his family to locate in Radnor. And in looking for properties, he found a property where both might be accomplished. And the property in question is zoned C1, and in the C1 district, a commercial use is permitted on the first floor with living accommodations on the second floor. So Mr. Zhu had met with Kevin Kuchansky, the zoning officer, in the first instance. It talked about the use and the permissibility of the use, noted that because of the smallness of the lot and the shape of the lot, that there would very likely, almost indefinitely, definitely be zoning issues with regard to setbacks and getting the parking on the lot without needing variances and so forth. So plans were prepared. We had, in Mr. Kuchansky's absence, had a Zoom meeting with Patty Kaufman and Stephen Orsini, the zoning officer and township engineer, had talked about the plan and made further modifications to the plan to try to address points that they had raised when we discussed it with them. And we came up with what had been a kind of twice reduced plan from when it was originally thought about to the plan that we used in our original application to this zoning board, our original application. And then, of course, because this is an application that will require a land development, we were required under the code to go to the Planning Commission for their review and recommendation. And when we went with the first plan, the Planning Commission voted. We had 2 favorable votes, but we had 4 negative votes, 4 votes that were recommending that you not approve the variance that we were requesting. Well, between the time of the Planning Commission and the first zoning hearing that was scheduled, that was continued, we made some modifications to the plan to address some of the points, what we thought were significant points that were made by the Planning Commission. So we were prepared to seek your approval of a plan that we didn't have a favorable vote from the Planning Commission. We had those issues with Mr. Hertz, the car issues. We were fortunate that evening to meet a neighbor with whom we have worked really carefully, who came up with an idea that, frankly, I didn't think was going to work when it was first suggested to us. But we worked with it, wrestled with it, and we were able to make it work. And ultimately, we were in the process of meeting with that neighbor when we requested the second continuance from this board, which you kindly granted, that enabled us to complete our discussions with that neighbor and refine the plan. And ultimately, we did that. We filed the application that is before you here. And the package that I handed out to you, A1A, is the original application that was filed. A1B is the amended application for which we seek approval tonight, and the plan that follows from A1B, which is essentially the same plan, but there may be a couple little dimensional tweaks on it, nothing that is significant or substantial, I should say. That A3 is the site plan for which approval is sought. As the chairman noted, it does require some variances. We think they're rather minor, each of them in nature. We think they are appropriate given the size and shape, configuration of the property, location of the property, and we're here to review the plan with you. And with that, what I'd like to do is just go through our exhibit package to inform you of the exhibits that are part of this hearing, and we will be referring to them during the course of the testimony. And as I've already mentioned, A1, A, and B. A2, which we haven't talked about yet, is a combined exhibit that has the zoning map on the left side of that exhibit, and on the right side is an aerial photograph with a red dot somewhat close to the center of that photograph that shows the location of the property. There is also a red dot that is on the zoning map that is on the left side that also indicates the property. So you can see the property is Zone C1. It immediately adjoins R2 district and a multifamily district in the back, C1 across or not multifamily, I believe it's a PLU district there, PLU across the street, C1 across the street. So we're kind of at the last property in the commercial district. C3 is the proposed plan, or A3, I'm sorry. A4 are the floor plans of the proposed building. On the first floor, it's built out for commercial use. There is a commercial office there. We've kept it so that we have the minimum number of parking spaces that we're required to put on the lot, and there's pavement on the lot, but it does meet code. We have a stairway that provides access to the living accommodations above on the second and third floor, and there is also a garage that affords an opportunity to have a vehicle undercover, protected, secure, with those elements, trash, and other things that typically are found in a garage, rakes, garden equipment, and so forth, so that may be inside rather than outside on the property. And then A5 are the elevations, the 4 elevations of the proposed building. I do note that these are preliminary elevations. If you were to approve this application, we would be required to file a land development application with the township, so there's going to be a lot of review, but this is certainly our first step. And as part of that, there would be architectural review of these drawings. A6 are the renderings of the various views looking north from West Wayne Avenue, and then also looking west from the rear of the pizza shop that is next door, and then a view looking northwest from West Wayne Avenue. And then we have A7. These are various photographs, and they are all labeled with descriptions on them. I do point out that there are 3 pages of it in that exhibit with 2 photographs on each page. And the pizza establishment that I've referred to here is the top photograph on the second page. And we'll be talking about that a little bit in the testimony. That's the property that is immediately next door. It has parking between the building and the street. In fact, the parking actually overlaps right on the sidewalk, so assuming when cars are parked there that there is a pedestrian walk around to get past that corner. So these are all the various views. A8 is a CV, curriculum vitae, for Mr. O'Neill, our engineer. A9 is the CV for John Hertz from the architectural design firm J2H. A10 is an excerpt from the comprehensive plan. One of the requirements in the zoning code is whether the application is consistent with the comprehensive plan, and I've highlighted what we believe to be relevant provisions, and I think you can read them and hopefully would agree that this application is consistent. I won't separately read them now. And then A11 is the recommendation that we received this time for this plan from the Planning Commission, and we were pleased that they went from a 4-2 denial vote to a unanimous 8-0 recommending their approval. Of course, the approval, if it is to comes from this board, not from the Planning Commission. They do make a recommendation. A12 is really a neighbor support signature package. Mr. Zhu originally, with his original application, approached many, many neighbors, and there are a lot of signatures there. He did not go back with what we believe is an improved plan and go to all those neighbors and burn them again with an explanation of the plan. But I think their approval the first time out really indicated their comfort with the proposed use and that there would be variances that were granted, and we think that those requests have been significantly reduced with the application. 13 is a decision of this board, or your predecessor board, zoning hearing board, that had been issued back in 2004, December of 2004, where there had been a request for a use variance to have a home, a residential home on this property, and that was denied. It's a commercially zoned property, and we would submit to you that the use that is proposed is probably about the best compromise for a use that is adjacent to a residential use, because there is certainly a residential feel to it with the living accommodations above that first level of commercial office. So I appreciate the time to give that background, and these exhibits, we'll try to move through these fairly quickly, but I'd like to call Mr. Zhu and ask him a few questions, if I may. If
Excuse me.
Yes.
If you're talking about these, as you flip through them, can we see them? I was remiss in.
Sure, I'm sorry, and you can, in fact, we'll go through and show all of these on the screen.
Thank you.
Yeah. Ken, if you wanted to come up. And it might expedite things for me simply to ask Mr. Zhu, you were here and listened to my explanation of your interest in the property for your... No, thank you. Yeah, just move over a little. Have you been sworn? I'm sorry. Yeah, thank you. Your interest in the property for your commercial office, as well as to locate your family in Radnor Township, is that right?
Yes, I do.
All right. Did I accurately describe that to the board?
Yes.
All right. And you are now the owner of this property, is that correct?
Yes, I'm the sole owner of the property.
Right, of your LLC, and you're the sole member of 411 West Wayne LLC, correct?
Yes.
Right. And the deed to the property is part of the application that was originally filed, part of A1A. And in connection with this application, you have engaged Mr. O'Neill as the civil engineer, Mr. Hertz to design the home for you and to work with Mr. O'Neill, is that correct?
Yes, we actually worked really hard to try to change the plan that fits the requirements.
Okay, so you did have the meetings that I described with Kevin Kachansky, and then we had a meeting with Patty Kaufman, zoning officer, as well as Steve Norsini, township engineer.
Yes.
All right. And you are looking to establish a real estate office on the first floor at this location?
Yes, it is.
And where is your office now?
Right now it's located in 3130 Willis Road, Philadelphia, PA 19136.
Yeah.
Oh.
The address?
3130 Willis Road, WILLITS Road, Philadelphia, PA 19136.
And briefly, what's your office at that location like? How many employees do you have there?
Currently, we have 2 full-times and 2 part-times.
Right. And what is your intention with respect to the operation of this office that's proposed at 411 West Wayne Avenue? Who would be working at that office?
At this moment, it's just me and my wife will be the one who solely use the one on 411 West Wayne.
And who would be in the living accommodations above the office at this location?
It's going to be me, my wife, and my 2 daughters.
Okay, and they're here this evening?
Yes, they are.
Okay. And did you, as I described to the board, take the plan that was included in the A1A package to various neighbors of this property who received notices of the zoning application?
Yes, I do. And also includes all the variants that we needed as a descriptions.
Right. And that was for the original application. Is it correct that you have not, again, approached all of those neighbors with respect to the modified application?
Yes, we have not approached them yet.
All right. But we did appear before the Planning Commission.
Yes, we do.
All right. And the exhibit that is marked as A12, all of those neighbor signatures, were you present when those neighbors signed this or no?
Yes, I am. I'm the person that bring the plan, the variants, the design, go to door knocking within the radius.
So you approached each and every one of these individuals and were present when they signed?
Yes.
Thank you. I have no other questions. All right, thank you.
Thank you so much.
I'd like to call Dennis O'Neill. Thanks.
Dennis O'Neill, O-N-E-I-L-L.
Dennis, you have been part of this application from its inception, and you heard my description of meetings with Kevin Kuchansky and Patty Kaufman and Steve Nursini. Did I accurately describe them? Is there anything that you differ in from what I said, or anything you would like to add to that?
They are accurate descriptions. There's nothing I'd like to add.
Okay. And you are a civil engineer, and your CV is attached as Exhibit A8, is that correct?
That is correct.
All right. And you have prepared various or plans along the way, and the current plan for which approval is sought from the board this evening is A3, is that correct?
That is correct.
You have seen A2, and this plan shows the zoning of the property 411 West Wayne Avenue, and it is located in a C1 zone, is that correct?
That is correct.
And it shows all of the zoning classifications that abut that property.
That is correct. The property is abutted by R2 to the west. It is abutted by an R4 density modification development to the north. It is C1 directly across the street, and to the east, it is catty-corner to a park, which is a PLU zoning district.
And on the right side of A2 is an aerial photograph, and the property is in and among the trees shown by a red dot. Is that correct?
That is correct.
And just to the east of the property on West Wayne Avenue is the pizza establishment that we've talked about.
Yes.
And I'd like you next to refer to Exhibit A3, and it might help actually to open up the larger exhibit here. It will be more easily seen by people looking at the screen. Just move it over here. Okay. And did you prepare A3?
Yes, I did.
Right. And generally what's shown on A3 in the upper right corner, again, is a zoning map. It's a location map. There are certain notes on the plan. It is dated February 23rd, 2023, last revised 9/21/23. There are a series of revisions as noted on the plan, correct?
That is correct.
And in the upper left corner, you show zoning data on existing zoning regulations, and you have analyzed how the proposed plan meets or does not meet those regulations.
That is correct.
Right. And you also have impervious cover calculations.
That is correct.
All right. Anything else generally?
The plan also lists the variances and special exceptions that are going to be requested in the application, and it also has a parking tabulation
Right.
on the plan.
And the variances that are noted on the plan are identical to the variances that were in the amended application, in which the chairman read at the beginning of this hearing, correct?
That is correct.
Right. Would you tell us about the plan?
Okay. The site is located along the northerly side of Wayne Avenue. It is approximately 170 to 200 feet from the intersection of Highland Avenue and Liberty Lane, which are kind of catty-corner to each other. This lot is 9,936 square feet, which includes 1,823 square feet of area in the right-of-way. As has been previously noted, it is Zone C1, and it's currently vacant land with approximately 15 to 20 mature trees on it. The lot is 114.48 feet at the title line, and it narrows as it moves back from the street. The C1 district requires lots to be 15,000 square feet, so this lot is somewhat short of that and is existing non-conforming. The ordinance also requires the lot to be 125 feet at the building setback line, 100 feet at the building setback line, and we are 96.25 feet. The lot narrows significantly as it moves to the back to a point at about 78 feet at its narrowest point, which is where the property line starts to go to the west. It's a very irregular shaped lot. As noted, there is a commercial establishment, restaurant to our east. The restaurant is approximately, I want to just get this number correct, 22.75 feet from the edge of paving or curb line. There is parking in the front where cars pull in. There's parking off of Liberty Lane where cars pull in and back out into the streets.
All right, when you say the restaurant, you're talking about the restaurant building is that dimension, that distance from
Correct.
the street? Thank you.
Across the street from us, there are commercial uses. Many of them are businesses that are operated on the ground floor with residential units on the upper floors, similar to apartments. Excuse me. There is a residential single-family home to our east, and there is a townhouse development, to our west, and a townhouse development to our north. Another requirement that is controlling the development of this lot is the total depth of the lot. This lot, total depth from the title line to the rear lot line is 109 feet, and that includes the area in the right-of-way. So when one calculates the 35% of the total lot depth from the title line, it sets a rear setback line of 38.24 as opposed to the 35-foot setback that is required if the lot were not measured from the title line, or the lot was less deep by 9 feet.
And just on that point, we've sought that variance. We meet the minimum 35-foot setback, but the code has a bit of an unusual provision that says if it's a very deep lot, And there's a certain percentage that you would take of that lot, 35%, is that correct?
35%.
35%. If that would indicate a greater rear yard setback, then you need to provide the greater rear yard setback. So but there is a question, I think, a fair question, and we're not going to make an issue of it here, but a fair question as to how you measure the depth of the lot. I don't really think the code answers how you measure the depth. There are arguments that could be made. You measure it from the lot that describes to the middle of the street, but lot as used in other ways in the zoning code refers to the net lot from the right-of-way to the rear property line. If you measure from the right-of-way to the rear property line, we wouldn't need any variance. 35 feet would be the greater of the two. If you're measuring it from the center line of the street, it's a little over 38 feet, so that's why we have sought that 3-foot variance. Just wanted to clarify that. I might have confused it, but I intended to clarify.
The lot, because it abuts 2 residential units, the C1 district requires 15-foot planted buffers against those property boundaries, further narrowing the buildable area and developable area of the lot. And because this lot is so small, if you deduct the area in the right-of-way, you have about an 8,800 square foot net lot area, which is about 54% of the required lot size. So we're essentially developing about half the lot area that would typically be developed in a C1 district. The plan shows a proposed development of a building that contains an office on the ground floor, which is 487.5 square feet. The building total is 43 by 22, or 946 square feet.
How many parking spaces are required for that amount of square footage of commercial office on the first floor?
So we are required to provide 1 space for every 200 square feet of 80% of the total area. So that's 2 total spaces for the office and 2 total spaces for the living accommodation, for a total of 4 spaces.
And 4 spaces are shown on this plan, 3 outside parallel to the eastern property line, and 1 space within a garage at the rear of the first level of the building, correct?
That is correct.
You make a point in your letter that you asked to use a different standard, or flip the coin, if you will, between land development and zoning?
Yes, I can explain that.
All right.
So the way we interpret the zoning ordinance, in the parking section of the zoning ordinance, it states that every parking space is required to be 9.5 by 20. It doesn't make a difference or make an allowance for a parallel parking space. However, if you go to subdivision land development ordinance, there's a number of parking space widths and lengths allotted for based on however your angle parking and when you get to parallel, it's 8 foot wide by 22 foot, which is a standard parallel parking space that you would find along any street or in any development that develop parallel parking. Correct.
And is the reason for that and I'm going to ask you about the driveway, whether the driveway that circumvents the building provides safe and reasonable access around the building, safe access on site, safe access at the street, both at the entrance and the exit, and how is the configuration of the driveway related to the request for variance as it relates to the width of the parking spaces?
So the plan proposes a one-way entrance to the east side of the building, a driveway which wraps around the building behind it and exits out of the west side of the building. We are required to have 200 feet of sight distance at each entrance in both directions on a local road, which we well comply with. And by having the parallel parking spaces on the side, it allowed us to, which we originally had parking in the front yard, allows us to move that parking out of the front yard, put it in the side yard, adjacent to the existing commercial use. So we're moving the building, on this plan, the building is further away from the residential use than the original plan that was in the application that was submitted in February.
So in fact, just to the comparative dimensions of the building, I believe the building is 4 feet narrower in width now than it was on the A1A application.
Correct. The original building was 26 feet wide. We're now 22. And it was 50.66 feet deep, and we are now 43 feet deep. So we're about 6.5 feet less in depth now than we were before.
Which obviously reduced the footprint of the building, reduced the commercial area on the first floor, resulting in one fewer parking space, 2 instead of 3 for the commercial spaces. It also reduced the living area on the second, third floor above. Is that correct?
That is correct. The original building had a footprint of 1,317 square feet, and there was a 550 square foot office with the living accommodations taking up the 2 floors above it at 1,317 square feet per floor.
One of the
Question? Sorry. You have a decent building envelope here that you could build in within the setbacks. Why didn't you consider an L-shaped house, where you can move the back? I mean, it seems like maybe it's a foot or 2. The front is 3.5, but you certainly have room to go towards Vic and Dean's.
What we're trying to deal with here is getting the parking in as well. So
I guess it doesn't seem like that is in any way.
well,
We're talking about the front of the building, where it seems like you have a lot of green space between, I mean, you have the driveway on the one side. I'm not sure what the gray stuff is. It's a walkway. You got a lot of space there. I mean, you could just build out.
well, we're also trying to make grade from the handicap parking space. So we need to provide, because it's commercial, we need to provide handicap accessibility. To get the building high enough, we need a ramp, a substantial ramp to get to that, make these grades work. We need that area between the building and the ramp in order to make the grades work.
Okay. To make grades work. To meet the ADA.
To meet ADA, correct.
Good that you got that on the record. Okay, good.
Yeah, and I appreciate you bringing that up. Could you just talk a moment more about the handicap parking space, where that is, why the exit appears on the passenger side to be a gravel or walkway rather than grass, which is immediately adjacent to the 2 spaces that are beyond it? And then talk about the connectivity of that handicap space to the walkway, if you will.
So the handicap space is proposed to be the very first of the 3 parallel parking spaces. Again, it is situated there for 2 reasons. One, to be able to get enough length to make the ramp work going up to the front door, and to avoid having someone who would get out of the car on the east side to walk between 2 cars or traverse between 2 parked cars and then have to cross the driveway. So what we looked at was the closest place we could make that crossing safely and then make the ramp going up to the front of the building. And therefore, although the handicap space is not the closest space to the front door, it is the closest space to the access to the building, and we believe that that will meet the ADA requirements based on their standards.
I think another challenge here with this plan was ensuring that the car that is parked in the garage has reasonable accessibility and the ability to get in and to get out. And then circumvent the building, is that correct?
Correct, and that is provided by allowing that car to swing into the garage, back out, and then around the back of the building. You may notice that the back driveway is wider than the two side driveways, which is to allow room for an SUV or a pickup truck that would enter the site to be able to get around there.
And have you analyzed the turning template situation
We have,
for this driveway?
we have used a turning template on it for a standard vehicle and for the SUV size vehicle.
Right. And those vehicles are able to navigate the driveway from entrance to exit?
That is correct.
What is proposed, and it isn't shown here, but by way of stormwater management? You propose to meet the code, and those plans will need to be prepared and submitted and reviewed by the township and township engineer as part of the land development approval process?
That is correct, and we had originally in the February plan tentatively sized the basin to determine that there was sufficient area to accommodate the square footage and cubic footage of stormwater that we need, and it would be located under the parking area.
Mr. O'Neill, you're familiar with the township code requirements for a variance, as well as the Pennsylvania Municipalities Planning Code requirements for a variance, and I can go through them here, or I can ask you generally, and the board could certainly ask that we provide more specificity on that, but whether you have reviewed those requirements, and let me ask you, have you reviewed those requirements?
Yes, I have.
Okay. And do you have a professional opinion as to whether those requirements are met in this particular application so as to entitle, provided the board would approve, this application and this plan to the variances that are being requested?
In my opinion, as a professional engineer, I believe this plan meets the intent of the ordinance to minimize the amount of relief necessary in order to make the site usable without doing harm or damage to the community and the surrounding area.
Right. So just in summary then, we're talking about the 3 feet at the rear, the 35 versus 38 feet. We're talking about the dimension of the parking spaces, it being 8 by 22 rather than 9.5 by 20, so you'd be meeting the saldo requirement. And in your professional opinion, do those spaces work and function on this plan with these grades at those dimensions?
Yes, they do.
And there is the very beginning of the handicap spot that is closest to West Wayne Avenue that dips into, that's the very rear end of that 22 feet. That dips into the 20-foot front yard setback and within 20 feet of the street. Is that correct?
That is correct. If you look at the 8-foot wide space adjacent to the driveway, it is about 5.5 feet projecting into the front yard. Adjacent to the curb, it's approximately 2 feet, and the total area is just about 30 square feet that this would project into that front yard.
Right. And if the car were pulled up a little bit towards the front of the space, the actual use of the space would be a tiny bit less than that.
Correct.
Right. Just to go over the one more point again, and that relates to the front yard relief that is requested. And Mr. Hertz can talk a little bit more about the building, but we've tried, or you've tried, Mr. Hertz has tried to shrink the length of that building as much as possible and still have what is a reasonably usable office on the first floor with that vehicular parking. Is that correct?
That is correct.
And within the garage, as I described, it's contemplated there would be an electric vehicle charging station. Is that correct?
Correct.
Mr. Zhu has an electric vehicle, and you also have reasonable room around the perimeter of the garage to store equipment and things that people often and typically store in their garage. Is that right?
That is correct. Because of the 15-foot buffers that are required on the two sides, it doesn't appear as though there'd be room for a shed on the property. So we're trying to accommodate that additional space in the garage.
And then finally, in terms of the adjoining properties, the setback, I'd like you to go from the pizza establishment to us to the residential home that is immediately to the west, and just give those 3 setbacks from the curb in sequence. So the setback from the pizza shop is,
22.75 feet from the curb line
our proposed setback,
is 24.75 feet from the curb line,
and on the residential property to the west?
25.34 feet from the curb line.
Okay, so we're about 7 inches closer to the curb line than the residential property to the west.
That is correct.
All right. I have no other questions of Mr. O'Neill.
Public comment?
Just Mr. Hertz, and I think we'll be much quicker with Mr. Hertz. John? And John, what is your position with J2H Designs?
I'm the owner and an architect.
Okay, and I have put yours, and I have marked your CV as Exhibit A9. Is that correct? That accurately describes your background and experience.
Correct.
And you prepared certain plans in connection with this application. And the first one that I'd like you to address is A4, which shows the floor plans of the first floor on the left side of that exhibit, and the second and third floor. Would you tell us, and I think the first floor is more critical to this application, the layout of the living space, less important, I would submit. But tell us about the first floor.
Yes, well, I mean, as Dennis continued to adjust the site plan, the footprint for the house continued to get smaller than what we originally had. But we wanted to make sure that we could get in there what was required by the township and what was asked for by the client. So we came up with the office space. We have a handicap bathroom in there. And then that small middle section is just a stairwell that gets you up to the living accommodations on the second and third floor. And then, as you've heard before, a small one-car garage area that also allows us to store trash cans and an electric vehicle charger and a couple other things that most people have in their homes. Also on the first floor, you can see some of the connection between the handicap access across the driveway from the parking space and then up the walkway. As Mr. O'Neill said, we do have this building approximately 24 inches out of the ground from grade to first floor, which means as an ADA ramp, we need a minimum of 24 feet to get our 1 to 12 ramp. So we had to take all that into consideration as we sort of went back and forth and tried to locate all the necessary components that were going to make this project work for Mr. Zhu.
And the first floor office area, as shown on your floor plan, is 487 feet.
Yes.
And I understand that is measured from the outside of the outside walls to, there is one wall that is an interior wall between the private entry where the stairs are located That wall is an interior wall, and you measure to the center of that wall for purposes of measuring the
Yes,
office floor area.
that common wall between the stairwell and the office space, you can see a center line that runs through that wall. So we went to the exterior side of all the walls and then down the center of that wall. And that gave us our 487.15 square feet for the
And I-
office space.
Right, and I think that's important just to validate the number of parking spaces that are required for the use being 2 rather than more than 2. And on the second, third floor, you show the living area on the second, the bedroom area on the third, is that correct?
Yes, the second floor is what you would call the public space of the home, and the third floor is the private space, the bedrooms, bathroom, a master bedroom, and then two bedrooms for Mr. Zhu's daughters.
Okay, so there's one bathroom on that third level, correct?
Correct.
And then A5, and I'm not going to ask you to go into much description, but these are elevations of the 4 facades of the proposed building.
Correct. These are preliminary elevations. Mr. Zhu would like to have a contemporary style home. So at the moment, this is where we are.
Okay, and you do understand that there will be, as we move through the process, architectural review of.
Yeah, we have to do a design review because the property is commercial.
And A6, these are renderings of 3 of the views of the home that you have prepared, is that correct?
Correct.
And in your opinion, is the first floor office area that you have designed at the 487 feet suitable for commercial office purposes?
Yes, I think for Mr. Zhu's needs as a real estate agent, for him and his wife to work in there, I think there's plenty of space. And as you can see in the floor plans, there's a small table in there and a small waiting area. I can't imagine a real estate office of this type generating 4 or 5 or 10 people at a time in there. So I think it would certainly accommodate Mr. Zhu, his wife, and 1 or 2 clients.
Excuse me, can you move that picture up so we can actually see it?
I'm sorry. Is that better? How about that?
Thank you.
Yeah. Oh, sorry. Yeah, I'll put it there. Okay.
Okay.
I don't have any other questions of Mr. Hertz, unless. Well, that concludes our testimony, and you've been very tolerant of allowing us to kind of argue our positions on the various variances that are required as we've presented the testimony. And I would simply say in conclusion that we've worked very hard to minimize the footprint of this home, the spaces within the home, and still make it all work. It's been quite challenging, and I do want to express appreciation to the neighbor with whom we have worked on this, who was very instrumental in twisting our arm and squeezing us until we found what he was suggesting would actually work, and we're thankful for that. Yeah, I would, thank you, move them all into evidence. That is correct. No, no.
I do. Baron Gemmer, Barongemmer. Thank you. Good evening. I'll be brief and just go over some of the points that I've seen on the plan. My interest in this plan originally, we own property.
Where do you live?
We live on South Wayne Avenue, but we own property about 1,200 feet from this property.
What's the address?
I'm sorry?
What's the address of the property?
128 Bloomingdale Avenue. I'm sorry.
You requesting party status?
No, I'm not.
Okay.
No, thank you for asking, though. No, actually, I'm in favor of the application. I wanted to emphasize some of the points that my original interest was. This is a place where we, at 128 Bloomingdale, we now have a rental. We lived there for 9 years, frequented this because of its location near the park and Vic and Dean's, and we're very concerned about the pedestrian and vehicular safety, both for our tenants and for myself, because I often come off the park here, the trail, and go to West Wayne or to Highland, et cetera. So that was my original interest, and I was concerned about some of the parking and pedestrian issues from the original plans, which you have, I believe, under A1A, whatever that might be. This new plan, what I want to emphasize is some of what I do like about it. I was on a committee about 10, 15 years ago for C1 in the West Wayne district in terms of to making sure it would stay a vibrant economic area. And I believe this plan, getting close to the 500 square feet, which dictates the 2 parking spaces, is a good balance there for that. It wouldn't be that much bigger for an old commercial building in terms of the footprint, or excuse me, that much smaller. It's also consistent with the neighborhood, because if you look at St. George Hunt, they use a U-shaped driveway which enters onto Liberty Lane. They don't have the advantage here. They have to have the full driveway for the U. But if you look at the parking at St. George Hunt, it's very convoluted. This is very straightforward, very understandable, easy in and out, which is also a difference from the first plan where it was two-way traffic, so you might go in and have to back out. This way, you don't find a spot, you just keep going around, and it's much safer for pedestrians. The exit, you've got a long look for the 12 feet, and then only the entrance there for the 12 feet where there's nobody in the front yard that's blocking those cars coming in. And the buildings, I think, because of the U-shape, makes it pretty far away. I did a calculation on an archetypical lot here of the 150 by 100, if it had parking over here where it was two-way and then parallel parking, which is some of the original plans that was presented there. And a footprint for the 150 by 100 would be about 1,600 square feet. And if you take the 9,900, I can't remember the exact square footage of this lot, it would put it in the neighborhood of about 1,090. So this property comes in at about 150 square feet less in the footprint than even if you did that proportional for what the normal lot would be. So I think this strikes a great balance in terms of the commercial and the residential. It's very highly pedestrian safe compared to some of the neighboring lots and compared to some of the previous plans. And it's also pretty much as far as it can be from the other neighbors. So I recommend all 5 of the variances, or the 1 special exception of the 4 variances. Thank you.
Any other public comment? Not seeing any further public comment, or individuals who want to make comment. Any more discussion?
I'll make the motion. It's a long one. I'm going to abbreviate it to a certain extent because I know our solicitor will write it up correctly. But making a motion to approve 4 variances, one under 280 48C regarding the front yard setback, 448E regarding the rear yard setback, 280 105F with regard to parking in the right-of-way, section 284 and 280 103 with regard to the reduction of the parking space dimensions to 88 by 22, and also approving a special exception under 208-105.f, again, with regard to front yard parking, all in accordance with the testimony and the plans in front of us.
I'll second.
More discussion?
Yeah, I'm good.
I'll call the vote.
Aye.
And I'm in favor. That's unanimous.
Thank you very much.
All students have to stay till the end of the hearing. That's how it works. You only get a C now, sorry. This is Nick. Nick's coming up. You got to stay.
Okay, we're going to take a 2-minute break and then get started again.
I'm reporting them to Tony Zaccardi, who's their professor, if they don't stick around. Yeah, you can, yeah, we can plug that in. Here. Figure it out. You're more, you're an architect, you know how to do this stuff.
I can see there are there are ports, but I don't want to crash the system. Okay, so there's this, and then apparently there's this.
Why don't you pull up A4? Yeah.
Just put it in there. Yeah, that's no problem. Yeah, let's see, I opened this, anyway.
Do you have all the exhibits in there or just yours?
Okay, so this is one. Oh, here, wait,
Yeah,
it looks like did I open this twice? Oh, no,
Okay.
here we go. There we go. Okay, so there are two different files. And here's the main one. This is the, so, and that is the same as that.
So,
Whatever your preference, I can switch back and forth.
you want to call up A?
I'm
Well, I'll tell you
kinda-
right now, I'm going to, at least for opening, why don't I use the plan? Because then I can just point to the plan
Yeah,
and show you.
I'm happy to do it with the
He's-
plan. So the plan is.
He's
there's a
more
camera.
technical than I am.
It's this camera on the table. I can also switch over if there's something you need on it. I sent that.
Is that the camera you just knocked over, that camera?
Yes, it's that overhead camera. I can zoom in and out.
Okay,
on my
all right. Well, let's try it here on the old-fashioned way.
Okay.
And if you feel the need to switch,
And if
just
we should,
make a comment and
I'll say, hey, get this
switch
guy
to
over here. Okay. Oh, you know, I have a rolled set that's not smushed up.
It's up to you. I don't care. Doesn't matter to me.
Unless you're concerned that you have these
No,
labeled as.
no,
an exhibit.
nothing's labeled.
Okay.
Well, yeah, that's the only thing.
Let's see how it looks on, here, it's okay. But
Yeah, here, let's push
I
it this
do-
way so I can show them the flag.
I do insist on it being straight. What's that for? Is that?
That's just a pointer so you can do one of these.
Oh, that's a good idea, so I don't have to.
Yeah. And actually, what'll happen too is you'll get a mic and I get a mic. So, I used to. Brad, how do these work now?
You know, the panels.
That must be.
Yeah, should be it, right? There you go.
I mean, even he asked me if you could stay and hold.
I was gonna say, I should.
Well, that's. I'm talking to Byron back there.
They want 4 variants.
No, it was about like why, it was like about, modernizing these older houses or tearing them down.
Yeah, and, no, I think there's some, I'll touch on that.
Listen, we had a fortune in this house to modernize within the envelope.
This house, I love this house.
We could have knocked it down and we would have saved a lot of money building a new one.
Oh, sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah, here we go. Like our friends live up the street, and he's like, I wish the lightning would hit 2/3 of the house.
You have to hear this, so that's the windows.
This is all Michelle.
Beautiful.
Appeal 3163, the applicant Charles and Michelle Freeman, property located at 939 Park Run Lane, is zoned R1 residential. The property has a flag lot, footprint interior lot, and is non-conforming as to the lot area requirements of 2 acres. Applicant proposed to add 375 square feet of impervious coverage, thereby increasing allowed impervious coverage by 0.43 of 1%. Or in parentheses, 0.43%. Applicant complies with the impervious requirement if the narrow projecting calculation and/or forest surfaces are not counted as impervious. Applicant contends that the requested relief is de minimis and seeks a variance from section 280-15F of the zoning code or such other zoning relief required by this application and the exhibits attached therein.
Thanks, John. Nick Keneally, representing the applicant on this matter. I'll go through a quick opening and try to explain what's going on here. As mentioned, this is on Parks Run. It's a home that was built in 1920. It's consistent with all the other homes in the area on Parks Run. I think everyone's familiar with Parks Run, both as to the building itself and the driveways and impervious coverage on the lot. The interesting thing about this lot, which differs, is that this is a flag lot. By the flag, meaning the pole portion here and the flag portion here being the larger portion of the lot. Prior to 1999, Radnor had no impervious coverage ordinance, except I think for institutional and maybe CO or something of that nature. But there was nothing in residential and nothing in C1. Around 2000 or so, Radnor amended their ordinance regarding flag lots. And flag lots, the flag of the flag lot had to be 2 acres, and you could not count the pole of the flag lot in your lot area requirement. So this lot is slightly non-conforming because it's a little bit less than 2 acres, or actually it's 2 acres, I believe, is about 86,000 something. This is 82,640 because you're excluding from lot area the actual pole portion of the lot. Interestingly, if you excluded this pole portion of the lot would conform currently with impervious coverage, and even after the proposed addition would also conform with impervious coverage. It's a heavily buffered lot, as you will see, a lot of lawn and grass area. You'll see photographs of the other properties and where they were located and the impervious coverage they have. One other thing, as I mentioned, this is only 376 square feet is being added because they're also removing a portion, so the net out is 376 square feet. The Shupins have done really nothing from grading on this lot since they purchased it in 2011. When they purchased it, they actually reduced the driveway area, thereby reducing the impervious, and also this court area here, this considered existing parking court, that was once macadam. That has been changed to gravel now, so that's about 3,400 square feet there as well. So when you add all these things up, you know, the point of the pole for the flag, the point of already turning this macadam into somewhat of a porous surface by being gravel, and the fact that we're only increasing by 376 square feet, I think that we have sufficient grounds for de minimis variance or maybe even by right, but we won't go there. We'll just request the variance if we can as de minimis variance. We have the Shupins will testify, and then Mark Asher, the architect, will testify as well. Norma's going to swear you in.
Okay.
Are you solemnly swear or affirm the testimony you're about to give will be the truth, whole truth, nothing but the truth? Yes. And state your names one at a time.
Charles Shupin.
Michelle, with one L, M-I-C-H-E-L-E.
Um, Michelle, you reside at the, that's on, I think, or put it on. Yes, on.
Okay.
You reside at the site,
Yes.
and who do you live there with?
My husband and 3 girls.
And you purchased the property in 2011?
Yes.
And I've marked as A2 a copy of the deed indicating that purchase.
Yes.
I'm going to show you what's been marked as A3. It's an aerial photograph, and you'll see other aerial photographs as well of this site. And this is your property with the red star on it.
Yes.
And these are the surrounding properties on Parks Run.
Yes.
Heavily buffered area,
Yes.
heavily green area.
Yes.
And is your lot consistent with these other lots as far as coverage and building and things of that nature? Actually, some of them look like they're larger than yours.
Yes.
You're proposing to do 2 things, correct? One is an addition located in this area, and can you just briefly describe the purpose of that addition?
Yes. On this portion of the house was originally a greenhouse, and the windows are original and old, and the roof slopes like a greenhouse would. It comes down to like 5 feet. So the windows need to be replaced. So at that time, we were deciding to take the windows out and then bring the ceiling up higher to, I forget the height we went to. A standard height, I believe, is 9 feet with doors. And then over here in this other area is just a bump out for a breakfast room, just to give a little bit more space for dining for our family.
And then the other thing you're proposing is a 1-story, 450 footprint, 400 square foot footprint pool house for the existing pool?
Yes.
Okay. And I believe one of the photos here, the photo up top on A4, it shows your neighbor's property in front of your house. It looks like the pool is almost right on the property line, their pool.
It looks like it is, but it's not. Yeah.
But it's close.
It's close. Yeah.
Okay, I mean, I'm sure it complies. It could be 10 feet, which is all that's required, but, it's pretty cool. Just showing again that your lot is consistent with your neighbor's lots regarding
Yes.
impervious
Oh, yes.
coverage and what occurs. Now, when you purchased this property, have you done any grading to the property since the purchase?
The only grading we really did was down at the end of the driveway.
Did you remove some of the driveway?
Oh, we removed some of the driveway. We made it smaller, and we took out all the macadam in the courtyard and made it gravel and also exposed like Belgian block, just to bring the house back to its original.
So I'm going to show you what is A9. Is this the area that we referenced as gravel? Again, we have other pictures we can
Yes.
show as well.
Yes.
And finally, there's the other parking areas. I said there's 2 parking areas. And Mark can describe that as far as architecturally and the architectural significance of this as to this style of home. But this is the other area as well, just so the board can see, which has been marked as A10.
Yes.
Okay. Now, have you spoken to your neighbors regarding this project?
Yes.
And
There's
has
no
any-
issues.
Okay.
No.
One's expressed any concern
No.
whatsoever?
Nope.
That's all I have for Michelle. Mark?
And you swear or affirm the testimony you're about to give will be the truth and whole truth, nothing but the
I do.
truth, and state your full name.
Mark Asher, A-S-H-E-R.
And Mark, what's your profession?
I am a registered architect.
And how long have you been a registered architect?
Well, in preparation for that question, I actually had to use a calculator today. 37 years I've been a registered architect in Pennsylvania and a few other states. I have an NCARB registration as well.
And how are you currently employed?
I am the founding partner of my firm, Asher, Sloan White and Partners. And we've been around for about 35 years. Some of those years were me working in my basement. But now there's a whole lot of me.
What type of architectural you do? Obviously, you do residential.
Yeah, we do almost exclusively custom residential work. That's sort of the niche that we fell into. We do a great deal of work on the Jersey coast. That sort of residential work. And then as most of our clients from the beach then pull us back to the leafier suburbs of Philadelphia.
And can I offer Mark as an expert in architectural design? John, we go with that? Mark is an expert in architectural design. Thank you. What's your involvement with this project, John?
Well, I'm the principal in charge. I mean, the way projects work in our office, and I'm sure many others, the project runs through me to a project team. But in the early days of the design, it's on my desk.
And what's the age of the home?
Well, you mentioned earlier it was built in 1920.
And what style is the home?
This is a house that is classified as French Norman Revival. So I think that it's similar to a lot of houses around here, but it's also very unique. It's if you compare it, and I don't want to get into a whole architectural dissertation, but if you think about this house in 1920, it's built 10 years after Ardrossan, which is a really formal, Gilded Age kind of thing, Baroque, Beaux-Arts style house, where this house is much simpler. It's almost, it came out of almost a rural farmhouse kind of vernacular. So it makes it a little unique to some of its neighbors, but just a beautiful house, just stunning, really.
Does the history of the home and the type of home inform any design standards or aspects?
Again, not to be all professorial about it. The house sits in a really interesting way on its site. I think if I pull back the camera and look at this is a really good picture where there's this detached garage and there's this old stone wall that links that to the main house and forms two separate parking areas, sort of, so you come in through the back drive, and there's sort of a service courtyard that would have been, in that time, certainly for, domestic help. I think a chauffeur lived in this building. I think I can pronounce it chauffeur, even though I have no idea really what that means. But so that service side, and then the drive continues through the stone wall to this more formal side. So it has this sort of estate feel and sense of arrival, and it's just so interesting how the drive breaks off into two separate portions. I think it's really interesting, and it's actually a design I'm copying for another house.
Is it customary for these style homes?
Well, it is in the sense that it gives this sort of like sense of a village, I think, would be what it does. The detached garage, the stone wall, again, a very informal house for its time. And, and of course, the flag adds to that sort of sense of arrival.
And is it heavily buffered and treed site?
Yeah, of course. And again, an interesting part about this house is it's not plopped down in the middle of the site as so many houses seem to be today. It's pulled off to the corner, so there's this really large, open, contiguous green space. So I think, just jumping ahead in the conversation a little bit, I think that's sort of an ameliorating factor in impervious calc. It doesn't show up in a spreadsheet, but there's all this green area around this house because the house is pushed to the corner of the site.
Let's look at the zoning table up top on the plan. First, as to building coverage, we're way under the building coverage requirement.
Correct.
Go ahead.
We're about 6% is our building coverage.
And the code permits 15%.
Then the code permits 15. So again, the house is less than half of what might be built here, what's allowed to be built here.
And according to the zoning information, and you've heard testimony here already, that the net increase in impervious is 376 square feet.
Correct.
And are you removing a portion of the home?
Yeah, I think we don't want a variance. We're not going to come here, cavalierly. So we try to do our best to whittle this thing down to get to 22%. So we took area away. There's some hardscaping, pretty good portion of hardscaping and patio that we're removing to try and offset the adds.
And now you heard my opening regarding the pole portion.
Correct.
The flag lot. Would you agree that if that pole was removed, this lot would conform? And actually, I believe you have it
Well, sure. We were always running the numbers both ways because I think we might have thought when this project started that maybe the flag doesn't count. Of course,
or the pole doesn't count.
The pole doesn't count. Of course it does, but it's just, we're looking at the numbers both ways. So taking away, what is about 2,000 square feet of driveway on the pole makes the lot, this would be conforming if it weren't for that driveway that we kind of have to pay for that.
And it would also be conforming even with the additional 376.
Oh, yeah, correct, yeah.
And there's as we mentioned, up in 2I, I believe it shows the percentages.
Yeah, it's here too.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So we're at, existing is 22.99, and proposed is 23.42. So it's a net add of 375 square feet.
Let's go to the next exhibit, which is A5. And these have some pictures. And also, first, A5 shows A5 shows, is a site survey and an engineer plan by McCumbee.
Correct.
Correct?
Mm-hmm.
And there's a blue portion and a red portion here. Can you describe what that blue and red portion represent?
Well, the red is area that was removed, and then the blue was added, just to make the turn into the house a little more graceful.
This was
and
done several years ago.
Yeah,
This
correct.
isn't,
Yeah.
not
So
recent.
red's taken away, blue is added,
And so actually there's a reduction.
and there's a reduction. Yeah.
Going back a little bit, and you heard the testimony already regarding that one area of gravel. Can you just describe that area? And I believe you said it was 3,400.
Yeah, it's about 3,400 square feet. That's the more formal forecourt to this house. And, I think there's not much to say about it except that it's gravel and a little bit more maybe historically accurate for this type of
I'll get it, Norman.
house.
And that gravel, now, the Radnor Code says that impervious is anything that does not absorb water, but then it talks about the opinion of the township engineer. And Radnor doesn't count gravel as porous. We know that, and there's no argument regarding that. They haven't counted it forever. But does that gravel, does it absorb some water?
Well, it's going to absorb it more than the macadam,
Right. But we're not getting any credit for it.
but I'm not getting any credit for it. No.
All right, just going through some of the photos up top, can you just tell the board what they represent?
Well, just the running left to right. This is sort of near the service yard, that arched window that used to be a garage. So the home had a detached garage and then an internal garage, probably pretty unusual for its day. That glass, that arched window is the family room to this house now. And then you can see the sunroom, greenhouse on both those pictures. That's the area that we're removing. As Michelle noted, it's low on one side. You can just barely get a door in the. You can see the door in the middle. Just barely squeezes in there. So that's coming off and returning to hard building and raising that roof up.
Okay, and looking at E6, that's just the floor plans for the site. I don't know if you have to go into much detail regarding.
Yeah,
that.
I don't think so. I think again, we're modernizing a house as has been done in the past on this house, and we're just continuing to do it. The family room was the old garage was a little small. The back hallways that led to the kitchen to that space were really tight, and there was really no place to eat in the kitchen. So we're just modernizing this historic home. That's as simple as that.
Does the plan comply with all other zoning requirements?
Yes.
And the next one is just some of the elevations of the home, again, keeping it consistent with.
Yeah, correct. I mean, we, in a nice way, hope it looks like nothing happened. So there's so the materials match, the stone matches, the grouting of that stone matches, and then the newer adds are just sort of a light glass work.
And A8, again, just shows the proposed pool house.
Yeah, and then it's just, you
kinda
get to see it in
small, yeah.
all its three-dimensional
Small
glory.
area, yeah. Okay.
Here, so.
All right. That's all we have.
Just Nick, I just want to make sure I heard you right, but at one point in our code, I don't know, what'd you call it? What was the strip called? What do you call the strip? Sorry. All right.
We were calling it the pole, I guess.
The pole. That was once explicitly excluded from the calculation?
No, I would not
No.
say it was excluded from the calculation. It is excluded from the lot area calculation now. Which
Now.
made this lot non-conforming.
Got it.
with the lot area.
Got it. Okay.
And actually, the interior lots, which is a flag lot, Ranner again changed that, and I guess it was from a development standpoint, that they didn't want to have all these flag lots around, John may remember, and so they made them, it had to be 2 acres. Because at one point, people were just, they didn't have much frontage on the street, and they're doing all these flag lots, and that were only 1 acre.
Got it.
So the township came in and probably rightfully said that it has to be 2 acres to be a flag.
Got it. Thank you.
John, the only thing I would request is that the exhibits be part of the record, please.
Any public comment?
Am I on? I'll make a motion to approve Appeal 3163. Am I reading the whole thing? Seeking a variance for Section 280-15F of the zoning code or such other zoning relief not required by this application. Can I have a second?
Second?
Any discussion on it?
Do we care if it's de minimis? The standard, I mean, if you get a regular, I mean, de minimis variance, what's different? I know what the difference is between, but from a legal perspective, do they care if they get a de minimis versus not?
The applicant does not make a difference. It's
Okay.
just whether or not you felt it matters if there wasn't.
Sorry, yeah, sorry about that.
The only way it matters is if whether or not you feel there wasn't enough of a hardship established. Right.
I'm good.
Aye.
Cast your nine.
Thank you, everyone. Have a good evening.
Thank you.
You swim in? Yeah. Jensen.
Josh Jensen, property located at 12 Rodney Road, zoned R4 residential. The applicants request relief from Section 280-30E of the code to construct a deck that encroaches 10 feet into the required 30-foot rear setback, yard setback.
I do. Joshua Hans Jensen.
Okay, keep your voice up.
Hans. H-A-N-S. J-E-A-N-S-O-N.
Either use the handheld microphone wherever that went, or the step up to the mic.
Can you hear me? Hi. Thanks for having me tonight. Sorry to bring some guests, but our babysitter are canceled, and my wife is giving her first exam tonight, so it's just been a day. I'm Josh. I am a new resident to, that's right, I'm Josh Hans Jensen. New resident to Bryn Mawr, the Radnor Township. We bought in 2021, November 2021, where we had a deck that was kind of falling over, and it also had a broken patio underneath. So January 2022, we engaged Plymouth Nursery to kind of come in and give us thoughts on building out a new deck that was safe for our kids, with a patio underneath that would be, could be used in the future for bringing it into the house or just having a flat patio for use. So we're requesting a variance today. The existing deck, or the deck that we have, the patio runs up to about 25, 26 feet from the property line behind us. The stairs coming down off run an additional 6 feet off the deck above it. So as we contracted this group to come in and do the work, we got a permit to build out the deck, which included all the schematics for our long-term plans as well as the immediate plans, which was a patio with a deck above it and stairs coming off. Work began, and then, we had the patio poured, we had the footers poured for the stairs coming off and the deck coming up, and then there were no concerns raised until the deck was framed out. That's when this was raised to us. We come to you with the variance request. I've given notice to all my neighbors. I've spoken with all my neighbors. They are very excited to see the deck. The only neighbor who had a slight concern was the neighbor we're encroaching upon, our backyard neighbor, who have just installed this lovely fence you can see right here. And the only request they've made of us is if we could plant some hedgerow or some coverage in between, so we're not looking directly into their deck. They're also not looking directly into our deck from their deck. So from the neighborhood perspective, there are no concerns. I'm sorry I don't have letters. And this is, we've just kind of come across this, some other family issues. So if you recommend I come back with additional information, I would gladly take that advice. So just let me know what you prefer. But from the neighborhood perspective, there's no concerns on encroachment. There's no concerns on how far we're coming back. From the deck concern is about 26 feet from the setback line, so it's not a full 10 from the setback. It's just like 4 plus from the setback. And it's the stairs coming off that really push it to the full 10 right here. And so I guess I and my lovely team building this deck for us are asking for a variance approval so we can move forward with this deck, which is mostly completed at this stage. Happy to answer any questions.
Some housekeeping. I'm going to mark the application as A1. This is for your exhibits that you'll move into evidence. And we have a deed, which is a special warranty deed, which is A2, and a drawing, which you have up on the screen.
Yes, sir.
Which is A3. So, okay. Any,
So you got a building permit from the township?
John?
Yeah, you got to get sworn in. I do. John Matthew Sheehan, John, Mathew-Sheehan. That's all.
Good evening, everyone. Yes, we initially went in, I want to say, gosh, it was probably January, and then we applied, we showed the plan, and they came out, and we went through, I should have brought, I guess, a copy of the receipt on that, but we did then obtain a permit to continue with construction.
A building
A
permit?
building
or-
permit, yes, sir, I'm
okay,
sorry,
now,
yes.
Okay, so you submitted these set of plans with the permit
Yes.
application, and they approved the permit application. How much have you spent on the project so far?
About $25,000.
Okay. All right. Looks like you've relied on the township. Just what was there beforehand? Was there an existing flat patio?
There was a flat patio and a deck. This is the primary egress, secondary egress off the main floor. So this is like the back exit. There was a deck, probably half the size, and then there's a patio underneath with
Half the size, so half the encroachment into the backyard setback.
Yeah.
Okay.
But the patio underneath had busted, which was causing the deck to fall apart.
But again, the old one was half the size.
It was not as far deep. No, I can't tell you the exact size, but definitely not as far deep.
So so again, I'm just trying to figure out as well if you have oh my God, I'm not even remembering the term, but I'm going to call it a pre-existing. No, just like it. Non-conforming, yeah. So, all right, so before, instead of it being 15 feet, it was 7.5-ish, or we'll call it 8?
It was bigger than that. So I would say 10 to 12.
Okay. All right, so it was conforming at that point. Okay. All right, got it. But you both are on record saying you got a building permit, it was approved, and you've expended some funding on the project.
I have paid money, yes, sir.
Got it. You got,
Can I ask a question first? I'm trying to understand. I understand that there was a or a deck that was falling apart, right?
Yes, sir.
And what was under the deck?
There was a flat concrete slab with broken foundation.
With a what?
A broken foundation.
Okay.
It was,
And cracked? The cement was cracked?
yes, sir. Like
And what was how far did that extend from the back of the house?
to about where we currently are.
So 10 feet, 12, what is it?
Uh,
I mean, it's what you replaced. In other words, I see what looks like a newly poured deck. Is that correct?
yes, we built up to make it level. It was not level
And
at
is
all.
that approximately the same size as what was there before?
The pad, yes, yes.
Okay.
so the pad is the same size as it was before, but the deck, the wooden deck, is now matching up to the pad size.
Correct.
As opposed to being half the size. Got it. Sound weird. Was the pad, the older pad, in any way attached to the house?
It wasn't attached in the fact that there was rebar going into the foundation, but it was a flat pour right up against it.
Okay. So you couldn't kind of tell if maybe the pad was poured at the same time as maybe the
Oh, no, I don't think it was, no.
Trying to help you.
I mean.
They're giving you really good ones here.
But
Helping.
I do want to just point out as well that we had 2 inspections after we received the
okay.
permit. Okay, all right.
Yeah. Yep.
But no, from what I can remember, I can't say for certain regarding that.
Because if it is attached, it means it's part of the principal dwelling, and therefore you have a non-conforming, but if you don't, you don't. So
I can't answer for sure. I do know that we didn't remove it in its entirety because some of it was still structurally sound.
Got it. So you would have no way to know anyway because you didn't break it
Correct.
down. Got it. Thank you. I have no other questions.
Do most of the houses around there, at least from the photographs, do they also have similar arrangements with patios and decks coming off?
Everyone does.
Do we need to swear the baby in?
If you like.
Yes.
Pictures of the other decks.
A question of our solicitor real quick.
I'm looking for sympathy points.
Do you, I mean, would a motion, if we made a motion, would you do a variance by estoppel? Would you explicitly say that, or you just say a variance?
The variance by estoppel isn't necessary. I would just do a variance.
Okay.
Yeah, that's all that's necessary. I mean, you can do that. The board can absolutely make that determination. It's not necessary.
Got it. Okay. Thank you.
We can show you an example of the deck behind us.
I guess that's not really going to help you. But there's decks.
Thank you.
So you're moving your exhibits into evidence, A1, A2, and A3. Yes, Mark. I don't think there's any public comment. Finally found something better to do. Any board, any questions, or no more questions for the applicant and his witness? Any board discussion? Do I hear a motion?
Okay, I'll make a motion to approve the variance under section 28030E of the code in accordance with the plans. And I certainly, I would say, I think it's a variance by estoppel. You've certainly relied on the township's approval of the permit.
I'll second. Aye.
Unanimous. Thank you. Good luck.
Thank you all very much.